poor black woman left flowers on a grave, until the CEO appeared and said, "That's my wife's grave, too." The last light of day faded over the crooked iron gates of Maplewood Cemetery, where the hum of the city softened into the whisper of wind through wet grass. The rain had just passed, leaving behind beads of water trembling on every petal and blade. A few flickering candles dotted the rows of gravestones, their flames fighting against the dusk. The ground was soft, dark, and full of the scent of earth and roses. Ariana Jones walked slowly between the headstones, her sneakers soaked through, her jacket thin against the chill. She didn't mind. This had become her ritual, her one act of peace after the noise and exhaustion of her long day. She was 22, though the lines around her tired eyes made her seem older. A cleaner by trade, a mother by instinct, a fighter by necessity. Her hands were rough, cracked from bleach and scrubbing, but they trembled with care as she carried a small bouquet of white daisies wrapped in newspaper. Ariana wasn't sure how she managed to buy them each week. Some days it meant skipping dinner, others meant walking to work to save on bus fare. But every time she stood before that grave, the sacrifice felt small. She stopped in the quiet corner of the cemetery where the name Grace Walters was carved into smooth marble. The stone was elegant, simple but dignified, framed by two angel statues streaked with rain. Ariana crouched, brushing away damp leaves from the base of the marker, and set the daisies down gently. Her fingers lingered there, tracing the carved letters as if greeting a friend. "Hi, Miss Grace," she whispered, her voice a soft tremor in the cool air. She talked the way one might talk to someone sitting beside them on a porch at sunset. Slow, honest, and full of pauses. "Malik's doing better in school this week. You'd be proud," she said, smiling faintly. "I got that extra shift at the clinic, too. It's hard, but we're okay." The words carried a warmth that the rain could not wash away. Ariana didn't know who else ever came here. The grave was always clean. The flowers she brought always wilted alone. So she spoke for both of them, for the living and for the one who had once saved her when she was at her lowest. It had been nearly 2 years since that night at the hospital. The one burned into Ariana's memory like a photograph. Her little boy had stopped breathing. Panic had turned her body cold. And then there was Grace, a stranger with kind eyes, holding Ariana's trembling hand and whispering prayers beside her until the doctors revived Malik. They never met again. A week later, Ariana saw the woman's picture in the paper, dead in an accident, survived by her husband. The name Grace Walters etched itself into Ariana's heart from that day on. So she came here, week after week, bringing flowers she could barely afford, whispering gratitude to the stone that marked her guardian angel. Sometimes she prayed, sometimes she cried, sometimes she just sat, letting the quiet hold her the way no one else did. The candles flickered low, and Ariana looked up at the sky, where the clouds had parted just enough to let one faint star show through. "You saved me, Miss Grace," she murmured. "I won't ever forget." She pressed her palm against the cold stone, the dampness seeping into her skin. The cemetery around her was still, peaceful, almost listening. And though she stood alone, Ariana felt something there with her, a presence, soft and unseen, that made her heart steady again. Then she gathered her empty flower paper, tucked it into her bag, and walked away slowly, the sound of her footsteps fading with the rain. The grave behind her glowed faintly in the candlelight, surrounded by white daisies and the quiet devotion of a woman who refused to forget kindness, no matter how poor she was. The next evening, the rain came harder than usual. Thunder rolled far off as Ariana hurried down the familiar path through the cemetery, clutching a cheap umbrella that did little to keep her dry. Her hands were red from cold, and the newspaper wrapping around the daisies was already dissolving into pulp. Still, she smiled faintly as she reached the corner where Grace Walters rested. The marble shone slick and gray under the storm. Ariana knelt, brushing her wet curls from her face, and placed the flowers at the base of the grave. She whispered, "Sorry I'm late, Miss Grace. Malik's got the sniffles again. You'd laugh at how stubborn he is, just like me." Her voice trembled with a laugh that wasn't entirely joy. Behind her, tires crunched over gravel. The sound was out of place, too sharp, too heavy for this quiet place. A black luxury car rolled to a stop a few yards away, headlights cutting through the mist. The engine idled low like a beast waiting. Ariana froze, her stomach tightening. No one ever came here at this hour. The driver's door opened. Out stepped a tall man in a black coat, the kind that looked expensive even when drenched. His presence carried something cold and commanding, like the rain itself parted to make way for him. His hair was slicked back, face pale and sharp-edged under the dim lights. For a moment he just stared at her, unreadable. Then his voice cut through the rain, deep, rough, and full of restrained anger. "What are you doing?" Ariana stood slowly, gripping the handle of her umbrella. She began, but he took a step closer, water dripping from his coat sleeves. "Why are you touching my wife's grave?" he demanded. The accusation in his tone stung worse than the cold. "Who gave you the right to be here? I didn't mean—" He gestured toward the daisies, soaked and small beside the elegant marble. "Those," he snapped, "you think this is some kind of charity act? Taking pity on a dead woman you didn't even know?" Ariana's throat tightened. For a second she wanted to run, but something in his voice, a crack buried beneath the anger, made her stay. She swallowed hard and said, "I knew her. Not well. But she helped me once." The man frowned, rain dripping from his jaw. "Helped you?" Ariana nodded. "2 years ago, my son almost died. I was in the hospital, terrified. There was this woman, your wife, I know that now. She stayed with me, held my hand, prayed with me. She didn't even know me, but she stayed until they saved him. Then she left before I could thank her." Alexander Walters didn't speak. The rain filled the silence between them, falling harder now, flattening the grass around their feet. His anger seemed to falter, confusion replacing it. "She saved your child," he said finally, his voice quieter. "Yes," Ariana whispered. "And when I saw her picture in the paper a week later, when I realized she'd died, I had to do something. I couldn't let her be forgotten." The man's shoulders dropped as if the weight of his own grief pressed him down. His gaze drifted to the grave, the name he'd avoided reading for months. "I haven't been back since the funeral," he murmured. "I couldn't." Ariana looked at him differently now, less like a threat, more like someone drowning in his own sorrow. She knelt again and touched the cold marble. "I come here because she made me believe in goodness," she said softly. "That's all." For a long moment neither moved. The rain blurred the line between tears and water. Then Alexander stepped forward, kneeling beside her. He placed a single red rose next to her daisies, the contrast sharp and beautiful against the stone. "Grace loved flowers," he said, almost to himself. "But I haven't brought her any." Ariana turned her head slightly. "She'd forgive you." She seemed like the forgiving type. He managed a faint, broken smile. "Maybe, thank you, for loving her when I couldn't." The storm quieted around them, as if the sky itself had softened. Two strangers kneeling side by side in the rain, bound by grief and gratitude to the same woman. The candles flickered weakly, their light reflecting in the wet marble, and for the first time in months, Alexander Walters let himself cry kitly, freely, beside the woman who had kept his wife's memory alive. The morning light filtered weakly through Ariana's window, slicing between the blinds and landing across a cluttered table covered in school notices, cleaning supplies, and a cracked picture frame of her and her son. The apartment was small. One bedroom, peeling wallpaper, the faint hum of an old refrigerator filling the silence. Yet, to Ariana, it was home. She tied her apron, fixed Malik's collar, and kissed his forehead before rushing to her second shift. Her body ached, but her spirit refused to bend. Each day was survival, stitched together with hope and fatigue. Across the city, Alexander Walters sat in his penthouse, surrounded by silence of another kind, the cold, echoing kind that no amount of wealth could fill. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked over the skyline, but his gaze was lost on the reflection of himself. The marble counters gleamed. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and loneliness. A single framed photo of Grace sat on his desk, her smile frozen mid-laughter. He couldn't remember the last time he had looked at it without guilt tightening his chest. 3 days after that rainy encounter, he found himself back at the cemetery without fully knowing why. He parked farther this time. No driver, no umbrella, just the restless pull of something unfinished. As he approached, he saw her there again, kneeling by the grave, carefully replacing wilted daisies with fresh ones. Ariana looked up, startled when she heard the crunch of gravel. "Oh," she said, her breath catching. "Mr. Walters." He gave a small nod, hands in his coat pockets. "Alexander," he corrected softly. "I brought these." He held out a small bouquet, white lilies, delicate and fresh. "For Grace, and maybe some for you to take home." Ariana hesitated, unsure how to accept a gift from a man who looked like he belonged to another world entirely. But the sincerity in his eyes steadied her. "Thank you," she murmured, taking them carefully. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Alexander said. He crouched beside the grave again, watching her arrange the flowers. "I thought I was the only one who missed her this much." Ariana smiled faintly. "You were her husband. Of course you miss her." He shook his head slowly. "I mean, I thought I was the only one who cared enough to come." There was silence, filled only by the wind moving through the trees. Ariana looked at the headstone, tracing the letters with her eyes. "She saved me," she whispered. "Not just that night at the hospital, she saved who I was. I'd given up, and then this stranger held my hand and told me to breathe, to believe that miracles happen. She made me believe again." Alexander's gaze darkened with memory. "She always did that," he said, his voice low, reverent. "Grace had this way of finding people who were drowning and throwing them something to hold on to. Even me." Ariana looked at him, curiosity softening her features. "You," he exhaled, the memory rising slow and painful. "I used to be different. She kept me grounded, made me remember what mattered. But I got too busy, meetings, deadlines, ambition. The night before the accident, we argued about a charity gala. I told her she was wasting her time with causes that didn't make profit." He laughed bitterly. "And now, here you are. Proof she was right all along." Ariana's eyes filled with quiet empathy. "We all say things we wish we could take back, but maybe you're honoring her now, by remembering the good she did." For a long time, they sat together in silence, strangers joined by the same ghost. The cemetery no longer felt heavy. It felt almost sacred. In that shared stillness, something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition. Two lives broken differently, slowly stitching each other back together through the memory of the same woman. When Ariana rose to leave, Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out a single white rose. "For next time," he said quietly. White was her favorite. Ariana smiled, touched. "I'll bring it for her next week." He nodded, stepping back, his eyes softening. "And maybe I'll bring another." As she walked away, Alexander lingered by the grave, watching her disappear down the path. The rain began again, light and steady, tapping against the petals they'd placed together. He laid his hand against the marble and whispered, "Thank you, Grace, for sending her." And in that moment, for the first time since losing his wife, the loneliness inside him eased, just a little. It was a Saturday morning, clear and cool after a night of steady rain. The ground was still damp, the air carrying the faint scent of wet earth. Ariana walked slowly along the cemetery path, her small son Malik skipping ahead, his laughter bright against the hush of the place. He was 4 now, wide-eyed, full of energy, with the same resilient light that had once flickered weakly under hospital lamps. He clutched a folded piece of paper and a handful of crayons in his other hand. "Stay close, baby," Ariana called softly, smiling despite her fatigue. Malik nodded, but his curiosity pulled him toward everything. The flowers, the names, the statues. When they reached Grace Walters' grave, he stopped and crouched down beside his mother, watching her unpack the small bundle of daisies wrapped in plastic. "This is her?" he asked in a whisper, as if afraid to disturb someone sleeping. "Yes, sweetheart," Ariana said. "The lady who helped us when you were sick." Malik's face brightened with recognition, though he didn't truly remember. "The angel lady," he said, as if it were the most natural name in the world. He unfolded his drawing, a crayon sketch of a stick-figure woman with wings and a bright yellow smile, and set it against the headstone. "For her," Ariana blinked back tears. "She'd love that," she whispered. Just then, footsteps approached on the gravel. Ariana turned to see Alexander walking toward them, holding a bouquet of deep red roses. His expression softened when he saw her and the boy. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said quietly. "It's all right," Ariana replied. She brushed her hands on her jeans and stood, a little awkward, unsure how he'd react to the sight of her son. Malik looked up at him curiously, eyes wide. Alexander knelt down, his expensive shoes sinking slightly in the soft ground. "Hey there, champ," he said, voice gentle, unfamiliar even to himself. "That your drawing?" Malik nodded proudly. "For the angel lady?" He pointed at the stick figure. "She saved me. Mommy says she's up there now." He pointed toward the sky, where sunlight peeked through the clouds. Alexander's throat tightened. "She did," he said softly. "She saved a lot of people. You're very lucky." Malik looked at him, serious for a moment. "Are you sad 'cause she's gone?" Alexander hesitated. "Every day." Without a word, Malik reached into his crayon box and pulled out a blue crayon. He offered it up with a small hand. "Here, blue makes people feel better. Mommy says so." Alexander stared at the crayon, something inside him breaking open just a little. A smile tugged at his lips, the first real one since Grace's funeral. "Then I'll keep it safe," he said, taking it carefully as if it were made of glass. Ariana watched the exchange, heart full and aching. For a brief, shining moment, the weight of class and loss and grief disappeared. There was only kindness, pure and simple. When the visit was done, clouds began to gather again. Ariana turned to leave, holding Malik's hand, but Alexander lingered beside his car. "You're walking?" he asked, surprised. "It's not far," she said. "Bus doesn't run this early." He hesitated. "Let me drive you, please. It's no trouble." Ariana shook her head. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," he said gently. "It's gratitude." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right." The drive through the city was quiet but comfortable. Malik chattered from the back seat about superheroes and crayons, while Alexander listened, smiling faintly at every small declaration. The car smelled of rain and roses, and Ariana found herself relaxing, the tension in her shoulders easing. When they reached her building, she thanked him and stepped out, Malik waving goodbye through the open window. Alexander waved back, the blue crayon still in his hand. "Take care, Malik," he said. As the car pulled away, Ariana glanced down at the bouquet she'd brought home. The cheap plastic flowers she'd used to fill the gaps in Grace's vase sat beside the single red rose Alexander had left behind. Different kinds of beauty, she thought. One bought with money, the other with love. And for the first time she began to see how healing wasn't found in what people gave, but in what they shared. The child, the flowers, the smiles, all of it proof that Grace lived on in ways neither of them could have expected. The world outside their quiet rituals soon took notice. What had once been a private act of remembrance became a headline. One morning, Ariana's coworker shoved a tabloid across the break room table, her expression torn between curiosity and pity. CEO Alexander Walters spotted with unknown woman and child at Oak Haven Cemetery. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Ariana's dark curls, Malik's bright jacket, Alexander's hand resting briefly on the boy's shoulder. The caption beneath read like a dagger, "Widower of Tech Empire Seen, cozying up to working-class mother, mystery romance, or charity project." Ariana's stomach dropped. The world that had always ignored her suddenly had an opinion, and none of it was kind. By noon, whispers spread through her workplace. Her supervisor called her in, his tone careful but sharp. "We can't have distractions, Miss Jones," he said. "People are talking. Maybe take some time off until this attention dies down. Time off. No pay. No security." She walked home with her head bowed, tears stinging but never falling. Malik skipped beside her, asking if they could bring new flowers tomorrow. Ariana nodded weakly, but her chest felt hollow. She hadn't asked for any of this. All she'd wanted was to honor the woman who'd saved her son. Now, it felt like she'd brought shame to Grace's name, and to the man who had trusted her. Meanwhile, Alexander sat in his office high above the city, the article glowing cold on his screen. His assistant hovered nearby, awkwardly silent. "Should I call PR?" she asked quietly. "No," he said. "Let them talk." But silence wasn't what his board wanted. That afternoon, the meeting room filled with sharp suits and sharper words. "Your image is slipping," one investor said. "People think you're distracted. Grieving is one thing, but this, woman," Alexander slammed his hand on the table. That woman, he interrupted, voice low and trembling with anger, showed my wife more respect in death than I did in life. The room went still. No one dared to reply. That night he drove to the cemetery in the rain again, hoping she'd be there. And she was, standing before Grace's grave, her small umbrella barely holding against the wind. Her flowers, he noticed, were missing. Only the crayon drawing Malik had made remained, edges curling with moisture. Ariana turned when she heard his footsteps. Her eyes were red, tired. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. He shook his head. "Neither should you. Not alone." "I am alone, Mr. Walters," she said, her voice trembling. "Always have been." He took a step closer. "You're not. Don't," she said, holding up a hand. "Please don't make this harder. I read the papers. I know what they're saying. I didn't mean to bring trouble to you. She was your wife. I was just someone she helped once." He stared at her, rain dripping down his face. "You were someone she changed," he said. "And maybe that's what she wanted, for us to keep her alive by remembering who she was." Ariana shook her head, tears finally breaking free. "People like you don't understand what it costs to be talked about. I can't lose my job, my home, not when Malik depends on me. So please, stop coming. Let this end before it hurts us both." The words came out like shards, cutting both of them as they fell. She turned away before he could answer. He watched her walk down the muddy path, umbrella trembling in the wind, her figure fading into the mist. For the first time since her weekly visits began, she left no flowers behind, only the wet earth and the faint memory of kindness. Alexander stood before the bare grave, the space where daisies once lay now empty, and felt the loss twice over. His wife gone to death, and now the woman who had kept her memory alive slipping away too. The rain poured harder, soaking his suit, but he didn't move. He simply whispered her name, Ariana, into the storm, the sound swallowed by the wind and silence of the cemetery that had once brought them together. The night after their painful parting, Alexander couldn't sleep. The penthouse felt emptier than ever, echoes of old laughter clinging to the walls, the faint scent of Grace's perfume still lingering on the silk pillowcases she'd once chosen. He poured himself another drink, but the whiskey burned without comfort. The newspaper headline lay crumpled on the counter beside a half-eaten meal, mocking him with its shallow words. Desperate to feel closer to her again, he opened the drawer of the cabinet where Grace's things were kept. Her journals, her jewelry box, the keepsakes he hadn't dared touch since the funeral. The lid creaked open, and there it was, a sealed envelope tucked beneath a photo of them smiling on their wedding day. The handwriting, graceful, looping, sent a shock through him. "To my Alexander," it read. His hands trembled as he broke the seal. The letter inside was dated 2 days before her accident. The ink had smudged slightly, but her warmth lived in every word. "My love, if you're reading this, it means I never got to say everything I should have. I'm sorry I've been gone so much, helping strangers, visiting hospitals, volunteering when I should have been home. But every time I sat with someone in pain, I thought of us, of how you once told me love means showing up. I suppose this was my way of showing up for the world. I know you think I give too much of myself, but what you never saw is how much it gave back to me. The people I met reminded me of who I wanted to be, someone kind, someone who leaves light behind. If anyone remembers me, let it be with kindness, not sorrow. Let them carry forward whatever good they felt from me. That will be enough. And if you ever meet someone who does, someone who carries that kindness, don't turn away. That's me, finding you again in another form. Always, Grace." By the time he reached the last line, the paper was blurred with tears. He clutched it to his chest, realizing what Grace had meant all along. Ariana was that kindness, the living continuation of the compassion Grace had sown into the world. While he'd hidden in grief, Ariana had done what he couldn't, keep Grace's love alive through action, through memory, through simple, enduring faith. The next morning, determination replaced sorrow. He dressed plainly, leaving his polished car behind. He asked around until he found the clinic where Ariana cleaned floors and stocked supplies. The staff stared as the CEO of Walters Technologies walked through the doors, rain-damp coat folded over his arm, eyes burning with purpose. Ariana was at the far end of the hall, mopping. When she looked up and saw him, her face drained of color. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. He shook his head, stepping closer. "I had to be." Her coworkers began to whisper, curious and tense. Alexander didn't care. He spoke loud enough for them to hear. "I owe this woman an apology," he said, his voice rough but steady. "The world tried to shame her for something sacred. She didn't seek fame or pity or money. She just honored someone I loved and reminded me what that love meant." A hush fell. Ariana froze, mop handle trembling in her hands. Alexander continued, his words thick with emotion. "You've done for Grace what I couldn't. You kept her love alive when I buried it under guilt." The words hit like thunder. Ariana's lips parted, eyes filling with tears. "You don't have to say that." "I do," he said, stepping closer. "Because it's true. You made me remember her the way she deserved to be remembered. Not as a loss, but as light." A single tear slipped down Ariana's cheek, followed by another. The room seemed to fade around them, leaving only the two of them and the echo of Grace's name between their hearts. "I thought I ruined your life," she said softly. "You saved it," he replied. The silence that followed was gentle, full of unspoken forgiveness. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Ariana said, "She'd be proud of you." Alexander smiled faintly through his tears. "No," he said, "she'd be proud of you." And there, in the sterile hallway of a modest clinic, the walls of wealth and grief and shame dissolved. What was left was human, two souls bound not by tragedy, but by the love of a woman who had managed, even in death, to bring them both back to life. The weeks that followed unfolded with a quiet sense of purpose. The scandal had faded into noise, replaced by something softer, rumors of the new memorial garden being built in Grace Walter's name. It wasn't a corporate project or a publicity stunt. It was something intimate, grounded, alive. And at its heart were two people who had once met as strangers in the rain Alexander stood beside. Ariana in an empty lot on the edge of the city, a small patch of land where the grass grew wild and sunlight fell through the branches like blessings. "Grace always loved places like this," he said, surveying the uneven soil. "She said flowers should grow where people can see them, not just in private gardens." Ariana smiled, shading her eyes. "Then we'll make it beautiful for her. For everyone." He turned toward her, the corners of his mouth lifting. "We." The word felt right, balanced. They worked side by side for weeks, choosing plants, sketching layouts, selecting benches. Their days were long, their hands often dirty, but the laughter came easily now. The formality between them faded, replaced by friendship that carried the warmth of something deeper but unspoken. Malik often tagged along, running between the flower beds with boundless energy. He had taken to calling Alexander Mr. Alex, a name that made the stoic man grin every time. Once, when Malik tripped and scraped his knee, Alexander knelt without hesitation, cleaning the wound and offering a lollipop from his pocket. Ariana watched the exchange with quiet gratitude. Alexander was changing, layer by layer, the ice in him melting into something human again. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the garden was finally ready. The air smelled of jasmine and damp soil, and small candles flickered along the winding path. Ariana and Alexander stood together at the heart of it, a stone fountain surrounded by white daisies and red roses, Grace's favorite colors. "This is more beautiful than I ever imagined," Ariana whispered. Alexander nodded, his gaze soft. "It's the first thing I've built that actually means something." She looked up at him, the candlelight reflecting in her eyes. "You've built more than a garden, Alexander. You've built peace." He smiled faintly, reaching into his pocket. From it, he drew 2 flowers, one daisy, one rose. "For her," he said. They knelt together, placing them side by side at the base of the fountain. The water shimmered around the petals, and for a moment, the air felt thick with something sacred. Alexander broke the silence first, his voice low and steady. "She brought us together." Ariana turned to him, a tear slipping down her cheek though her smile was warm. Maybe she knew we both needed saving. Their eyes met, not in longing, but in understanding. The kind of connection that didn't need promises or declarations. It simply was. As the candles flickered around them, Malik's laughter echoed in the distance, and the garden seemed to glow. 2 lives once marked by loss now stood surrounded by new beginnings. And though Grace's name was etched in stone, her love lived, rooted in the soil, carried in every flower, and reflected in the 2 hearts she had unknowingly joined. A full year passed, and what began as a patch of bare earth had blossomed into something alive and radiant. The Grace Walters Memorial Garden was now a sanctuary in the heart of the city, bright with color, laughter, and life. Children played along the winding paths, their giggles rising with the hum of bees and rustle of leaves. Families came to rest on benches shaded by lilac trees, and the fountain at the garden's center shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. Ariana stood near the fountain, her son Malik darting through the roses with boundless joy, his laughter echoing through the space. She wore a simple white dress, her hands clasped together as she looked around at what they had built, a garden of healing, of love, of remembrance. Nearby, Alexander stood behind a wooden podium, his voice carrying calm strength as he addressed the small crowd. Grace believed kindness could grow, even in the hardest places, he said. This garden is proof of that. It belongs to everyone now. When the applause faded, Ariana stepped forward. Her voice trembled slightly, but her words were steady. Grace once gave me hope when I had none. This garden is her gift to all of us, a reminder that love doesn't end when life does. Later, as the guests drifted away, the 2 of them walked in silence to the cemetery where it had all begun. The evening air was soft and gold. Together, they knelt before Grace's grave. Ariana placed a bouquet of daisies. Alexander set down roses beside them. 2 offerings side by side, 2 forms of love, different but equal. Alexander whispered, "Thank you for loving her when I couldn't." Ariana smiled through her tears. "And thank you for letting her love live on." As they rose, Malik ran laughing between them, the garden behind glowing in the twilight, proof that grief, when tended with grace, could bloom into something beautiful.